Well, hello, my beautiful book besties. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Liv if you're new here, and today we are doing another massive book unhaul. As I was moving my books, I was just like, I am so sick of owning this many books. I know that's a good problem to have. You can never have too many books, right? But for me, as a type 1, very organized person, if there is chaos in books everywhere, it drives me insane. If I have clutter in my life, I have clutter in my mind and I just cannot think straight. But now my bookshelves are all together on a wall and it makes me so happy and it just makes this room so much more spacious. But during that rearranging time, I had a lot of thinking to do. So all of those things led me to do another big massive unhaul. I feel like we all kind of do that at the beginning of the year, where we kind of reassess our reading taste and what our goals were the last year and try to make that different or align it with what you want to do for the upcoming year. And I would say my reading taste has definitely shifted quite a bit. I no longer own any horror books. I've gotten rid of so many cozy mysteries and romance books even. I'm finding that I am so picky with romance, and the majority of books that I own are fantasy and mystery thrillers, and that's okay for me. Like, I do not need to own all genres on the spectrum. I can just own books that make me happy. I just want to come in my library room and not feel overwhelmed by all the different choices or even all of the books I've owned since like 2019. I've had quite a few books that I still want to read that I am getting rid of, but for now I don't have room on my shelves for any new incoming new releases that could be potential favorite books of all time. So obviously, for many different personal reasons of my own, I am unhauling I think about 60 to 70 more books, and these books are already on Pango and I have already sold some of them. So if you see any of these books that you want, definitely go check out my Pango because they might still be over there. So without further rambling, I'm going to go ahead and dive into these books, and I am going to go by genre like I did my previous unhaul, just in case there's anything that you don't care to see. Definitely grab yourselves a coffee or cozy up because I have a feeling this is going to be another long video. I'm going to go ahead and start us off with some ARCs actually that I have received from publishers, and I have not read them. I've lost interest in them. I will just be donating these to my local library. Starting us off with Meet Me in the Margins. I have heard good things about this romance book. Other than that, I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about this author. I am just planning to stick to romance authors that I know and already love. I am still intrigued by this one because I believe it's about writers or something, and I love that kind of topic in my books. But unfortunately, if I've had it this long, I haven't touched it, and I'm not seeing a lot of people review it other than like the few good things that I've seen. I just don't feel like this one is worth holding on to. Next, I have In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. Now, I have battled back and forth with wanting to read this one. One of my really good friends read this or tried to read it, and she said it was actually really sexual, and that is not something I expected from this author. What I've read from him has been very cute, light, fluffy, fun things, and I just don't know about this one. The premise intrigues me. Also, this one gears more towards sci-fi, which I'm really not that into these days, so I think I'm also going to be passing on this one as much as it pains me. I also have Not That Kind of Ever After, which looks and sounds really cute. It's a fairy tale meets feminism in this frothy adventure of one woman's journey to claim her happily ever after. I think this is some sort of Cinderella retelling or reimagining, but I just have not seen anything about this one. You can definitely convince me to hang on to any of these if you've read them, but again, with the YA romance, I just don't think it's going to be my jam. Next, I have Finley Donovan Jumps the Gun, and the only reason I'm getting rid of this one is because I do have the finished hardback, and she told me herself that I really actually need to read the hardback because a lot of changes were made between the ARC and the finished copy. I also have It Found Us by Lindsay Curry, and while I do really love Lindsay Curry, I don't read middle grade hardly ever, and if I do, it's more fantasy and dragons and fairy tale like stories. The cover, I'm I'm not gonna lie, it's not my favorite. I've heard that this is her spookiest book, so I definitely still want to read it or give it a chance at some point, but I know I can also get this on audio, so I don't feel the need to own this cover because it's definitely not my favorite. And last of my ARCs is Only If You're Lucky by Stacey Willingham. I actually have not read a single Stacey Willingham book yet, but from those of you who have read her books have said this one is incredibly boring and incredibly slow. I don't think this is going to be the first encounter I want to have with this author, and because of that reason I think I'm going to set this one aside. I do own one or two of her other books actually that I am really interested by, but I just don't want to start with this one. I could hold on to it, but again I could just get this from the library. Next I have a non-fiction, which I think is my only non-fiction I'm getting rid of, which is How to Break Up with Your Phone. I read this book and it was actually really impactful, but what I didn't like is there was a lot of statistics in this book. There were a lot of quotes and just things that weren't necessarily from the author themselves, and I just wanted something that felt a little bit more natural. I did highlight the crap out of this and it was very impactful, but also half the book is like this plan to detox you from social media, and I've tried to do it. I've tried to do so many social media detoxes. I know it works for me now specifically, and I just feel like this book isn't worth holding on to, even though I definitely really would recommend trying this one. Next I have a couple sci-fi books, which like I said, I'm not necessarily in the mood for these days. That is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Nouvelle. I bought this super cheap because I think I saw Kayla from Books and Lala read this and she absolutely loved it and said it was very unique and it didn't feel like super over your head type of sci-fi, and I was like, okay, great. I feel like this could be one that I actually really love. But have I read it yet? No, and I've owned it for 3 years I think, or 4. I have this rule now where the books that I own, if I've owned them longer than 4 years, even 3, I feel like it's just time for them to go. I don't want to own a bunch of backlisted books anymore, and this is one that again I could just get from my library if I really wanted to. I also have The Humans by Matt Haig, which I actually loved and would recommend. I love Matt Haig's humor and the way he interweaves just humanity in his stories. I feel like this was super good with the way it was done. I am not a rereader. I feel like most of you know this. If I've read a book and I loved it, or it's an absolute favorite of all time, I will keep it. This unfortunately just did not make the cut. I've just seen other shows that do this very similarly. Next, I have some more contemporary and then going into our romance books. I feel like this probably, no, I don't think this is my biggest stack. I think my mystery thrillers and fantasy are probably about even, but we're just gonna walk through these together because some of them I had a really hard time deciding if I wanted to keep them or not. The first one is The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin. I read one of Chloe Benjamin's books a really long time ago and it was okay, and I just don't know if I'm gonna like this one. I think it's more magical realism about these siblings that find out the day they're gonna die and then they try to change kind of the trajectory of their life. I think the reason why I want to get rid of this one is just because I've had it since 2019, and that's 5 years too long. I just have a feeling it's not going to be like one of my favorites of all time. I could be wrong, but I just don't hear a lot about this author, so I'm just very unsure about this one. Next, I have what I think is my only Christmas book in this unhaul. That is The Afterlife of Holly Chase. And while I really did enjoy this and love it at the time that I read it, I don't know if it would be like a favorite now. So again, I'm just gonna get rid of it. I also just don't want to own a lot of Christmas books. I feel like I read about 4 or 5 Christmas books a year max. I know some people thought this one was cringy, but I actually thought it was pretty good. The next book I have is Georgie All Along, which I think is more of like a contemporary story about a girl just like finding her way in life. I don't know if this is an actual romance or not. I was really excited to read this one because I was seeing good things. I think it was even a book of the month choice, and then the hype kind of died down for me. Next, I have a book that I have battled with wanting to get rid of or not. That is You've Reached Sam. I actually read this a long time ago, or I mean I started it and I read 40 pages and it was so incredibly depressing. I just felt like this was way too heavy for a young adult book. I feel like this could be a really good read, so I don't know, I don't really want to get rid of it, but like I've had it for so long. Oh, okay, it just got really dark outside all of a sudden, but we're just gonna continue to go on. I have When We Were Vikings by Andrew David MacDonald, which is one of the first ever finished hardcover copybooks I ever received. I was so excited that a publisher would send me such an amazing looking book, which is basically the only two reasons I've held on to this, because of the cover and the nostalgic reasons. I have not really seen people talk about this, but the few reviews I have seen have been really good. I just don't know. It says, for fans of Silver Linings Playbook and the Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. I just feel like since those are more contemporary or lit fic books, this is probably going to be along those lines, and I just don't think it's going to be for me. Next I have Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter, which kind of shocked me to get rid of. I know, I actually really did enjoy this book, but I'm not a rereader. I just don't ever see myself rereading a romance book, so that's where I'm at with this one. I don't know if Lynn Painter is going to top any of my other favorite romance authors, so at this point we are just going to move on with this one. Kind of the same situation with The Rebound by Catherine Walsh. I read her new Christmas book thinking I would love it as much as holiday romance, and I definitely didn't. I felt like there was some weird switch where like I felt like I was reading a completely different author. I don't know if that makes any sense, but since then I've been very skeptical of her other books, and this one is just kind of about a rebound. Obviously this girl is going through some type of breakup, and I just feel like the premise isn't really me or something I would like to read. So for those reasons, I'm going to be passing this one along. I also have Things You Save in a Fire by Catherine Senner. To be completely honest, I don't even know if I'm gonna like Catherine Senner. I've had this book for a while. I got it for super cheap, and there's like this gross sticker on the front that I cannot get off. I can easily get this book from the library, which is probably what I'll do at some point. I also have Better Than Fiction by Alexa Martin, which this book is so cute and adorable, but honestly I've just lost interest. It says, love isn't always by the book in this charming romantic comedy about a bookseller discovering how to be the main character in her story. It sounds like it has the potential to be cute, but like, I don't know, I just don't pick up romance very often. I have a summary romance book that I might end up keeping. I can't decide yet. It's Wait For It by Jen McKinley. It's about either the male or female. I can't remember which. They end up going on a vacation and falling in love with the host of like the house or the Airbnb that they're staying at. So it sounds cute and it sounds summery and fun, but because I haven't seen any people that I love and trust read this and talk about it, I think I'm going to be passing this one along as well. I also have The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. I've read a couple Rachel Hawkins books, and the most I've given her books is a 3-star. I know that this is a romance, I know it's witchy and cute and like a rom-com, but I have owned this book for forever. Like since it came out, I obviously got it with book of the month, and every single time that fall has rolled around, I just have not gravitated towards this or wanted to pick it up. So yeah, if you want it, go get it in my Pango shop. And another romance that I'm just not so sure of, Lunar Love. I love the cover. It sounds like it could be really sweet and vibrant with a lot of traditional Chinese culture, but I just don't know. I just don't know. Next, we're gonna jump right into the mystery thrillers, starting with this horror book called Kill Creek. I tried the audio and could not get with the audio. It was just not good. Next, I have These Silent Woods by Kimmy Cunningham Grant, and I have heard really great and amazing things about this, but I'm not gonna lie, the synopsis sounds extremely boring. I was willing to give it a shot. I got this for super cheap, but I honestly just don't even love the size of this book. It's tiny, it's weird, and I don't know. I don't know why I bought it in the first place. I should have just waited. Next, I have a recent read, That's Not My Name, that I did not really like. In hindsight, I think I would give it 2 stars, although I think I rated it a 3. This just was not for me. It did everything that your typical YA mystery thriller would do. I was intrigued from the very beginning, but the pace was just really off. The end was just very lackluster, so I don't think this is going to go on my favorites shelf. Then I have Gone Girl, which I have been wanting to read for a very long time. I feel like this is one of the OG mystery thrillers, but honestly, I'd rather watch the movie at this point. I've had this copy that I got for $1 like 5 years ago, and I just have not picked it up. I don't know why. I'm just not gravitating towards it ever since I read, I think it was Sharp Objects or something, and I hated it. So I don't think that I will be reading any more of her books anytime soon. I also have another recent read, The Villa by Rachel Hawkins, which I actually did enjoy this one more than I thought, but again, just not enough to keep it. I feel like this would be a good book to read during spooky season actually, because it has a lot of underlying Mary Shelley vibes. I also have The Arrangement by Kirsten Majlin. I just know that this author's not going to be for me. I wanted to believe it. I bought this to believe it and believe in her, but I've just quickly lost interest. I know she writes basically all domestic suspense or domestic thrillers, and that's typically not my jam. So I think I'm going to be passing on this author altogether. Another book that I have owned for so long and I debated on keeping, but I'm just tired of seeing it on my shelves, is The Lake House by Kate Morton. The ratings on Goodreads for this are phenomenal, but again, it's just a backlisted book that I could easily get from my local library, so that is the route I'm going to take if I ever decide to actually read this one. I also have Ward D, which is another recent read and another recent thriller that I gave 3 stars. Thrillers for me are never going to be rereads. If I already remember the end, where is the thrill in that? Like, I just don't see myself finding the books as thrilling as they were the first time around, and this one for me, I think it's been my least favorite Frida book. It just did not live up to what I wanted it to be. I also have The 22 Murders of Madison May, which sounded at the time like a really good mystery thriller, but that was back when I wasn't really reading them and was just kind of blindly choosing thrillers. This could have the potential to be a really good book, but I'm hoping someone out there will love this book because I just have a feeling it's not going to be my favorite. The Enigma of Room 622, and while I'm still very intrigued or curious by this one, this book is massive for a mystery thriller, y'all. This is like 550 pages. I just don't think there's enough in here to keep me intrigued for almost 600 pages. Like, that's crazy. If you've read this one and loved it, let me know. Honestly, it just intimidates me. I also have The Escape Room by Megan Golden. I think Megan Golden and I are just gonna be like acquaintances at this point. I've tried to read, or I did read one of her books, I think Stay Awake, just didn't really love it, and I've heard this one specifically let a lot of people down. It's supposed to be an escape room, but I think they just all get stuck in an elevator. I just don't really care enough to keep it. Claire McIntosh, I've heard enough about her to know that I don't think she's going to be a favorite mystery thriller author for me. It's all set on a plane, which makes it more isolated and more scary and more high stakes, but I have a feeling this one's going to be really sad. But I just am really tired of seeing it on my shelves. I got it for so cheap. A lot of these books I got at library sales, and I don't feel bad for getting rid of them. Another one that I'm so sorry to see go is a Sally Hepworth book, The Soulmate. This one unfortunately was like a 2.5, 3 star for me. I just did not jive with it. It was super depressing and just had a completely different tone than the rest of her books. Even though I did go to an author event and she signed this, I have a picture with her, so I just don't feel like I need to keep the book for keepsakes or anything. But her new book, Darling Girls, I gave 5 stars, so I'm definitely not giving up on her yet. Next, I have another horror book called Go Hunt Me. I actually just kind of bought this on a whim for spooky season, and I have since then lost interest. It's about some kids that go to this castle that are creating a documentary, and I think it's the castle that like Dracula was inspired by, or maybe they're creating a documentary on Dracula. I honestly can't remember. It's gotten decent reviews, but I haven't really heard of this author before. Kate Ellis Marshall is an author that I love, but have kind of learned to hate. I tried her newest mystery thriller, adult thriller, and I really was not a fan. So I kind of have trust issues with this author. I also tried to read These Fleeting Shadows and didn't love it either, so I think I'm gonna have to pass on this one. I was really excited about it, and now all of a sudden I just kind of don't trust her anymore, so I don't know if she's gonna be a favorite author for me now. I also have The Invited by Jennifer McMahon, which is an author that I still really do love. Unfortunately, this one wasn't my favorite from her, so I don't think I will be rereading it. While her writing is impeccable and it's just so entertaining, writing. This one was just not quite up to par with the rest of her books that I've read. I have 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard. I do actually own Runtime by her, and I'm very intrigued by that one, but because this one is centered around COVID, I just don't want to relive those times and go back to that. I also just don't love isolated thrillers. I feel like I could do without that setting, so for me, I just don't think this one's gonna end up being like a 5-star or anything, and I don't feel like I'm missing out. I have a Catherine Stedman book, The Family Game, which I actually really liked, and I flew through this book like crazy. I've read it. I'm definitely gonna read more from this author, but I'm never gonna reread this one. I also have 2 Jennifer Hillier books here, and I've debated getting rid of these for so long, but here's the thing. I read one of her first ever books, the one that has to do with like an amusement park, and I hated it. Hands down, one of the worst book, if not the worst book I've ever read, and since then I've had a terrible taste in my mouth for this author. I've heard this one is like her best one, but on the other hand, I've heard this one is super dark and has a lot of content warnings, so while they might be really good books, I just don't feel like, because of how dark her books are, that it's going to be anything I want to read. I also have a good old Paula Hawkins, The Girl on the Train. Bought it for super cheap when I was initially starting my mystery thriller journey. I would just rather watch the movie at this point. Going off the mystery thrillers, I do have a couple cozy mysteries that I'm going to be passing on. One of them is Rhythm and Clues. It's like this vinyl shop or record shop mystery series. I read the first one and just did not really care for it. I didn't really like any of the characters other than the sisters that own the shop. I also just felt like the ending was so lackluster and I didn't care about any of the characters, so I will not be continuing on with this series, unfortunately. I have Death by Dumpling, which I really loved and recommended, but I think there's like 9 books out by this point, and I read this book last year. I just cannot keep up with the cozies, guys, and I am just going to be listening to a lot of them from now on. I have One for the Money, which has been very much compared to Finley Donovan, which you guys know I love. I picked this one up without knowing that it was published in 1994, which was the year I was born. I have a feeling it could be good, but again, I just don't know about this one, and if I'm not 100% certain, it's not going to stay on my bookshelf. I also have Vera Wong's, which I did really enjoy. It's just not a book that I'm going to reread once again. I did also spill coffee on the edges, along all of the edges, and if I do want to rebuy this and keep this, I would rather own like a pristine looking copy versus one that I spilled coffee all over. A couple middle grade books that I'm going to be unhauling is The Polar Bear Explorers Club by Alex Bell. I do really love this cover and I feel like it could be really cute and adventurous, but I am just tired of putting this on my like winter Christmassy TBR and never reading it for 4 years in a row now. And maybe I can give it to my younger sisters that would appreciate like a fun little middle grade book. I also have The Bellwoods Game, which I heard was really good and super creepy until it wasn't. I don't know, I'm seeing a lot of mixed reviews about this one and I was really pumped for it. I don't read a lot of spooky middle grade books, I guess you would call it. I would much rather read like YA witchy fantasy or something like that during the fall season, so fortunately gonna be unhauling this one, probably giving it to my sisters as well. And then I just have a quick couple manga before we get into the biggest stack, which you know is fantasy. I have Sweetness and Lightning, which I really did enjoy. This is a really sweet daddy-daughter duo that runs like this restaurant and he's trying to find love, and it's really cute. It's really sweet. I just didn't love this one enough to own the series and continue on. And then I have one of my favorites that I just need to continue watching the show because I think there's like 40 volumes or something out at this point. I literally cannot keep up. It's a finished series, but there's no way in heck do I want these taking up that much shelving space. And that is Nisekoi volumes 1 and 2, which I read and I loved them. This is such a good manga. It is one of like the best, I guess, love triangles you could say that I've seen. It's kind of like a high school slice of life. I think there's also like a mystery kind of behind it as well. So I loved all the different aspects weaved into this story, but again, it's so long and I would just rather watch the show at this point. Next, we're going to move on to the fantasy stack, which makes sense. I own the most fantasy, that I'm unhauling the most fantasy. I feel like I just want to keep my favorites and the ones that I'm super looking forward to on my shelves. And I also want to make room for series. I have some backlisted series that I really would love to read, but I only own like number 1 or 2. So I want to make more space on my shelves for those. So that's why I'm getting rid of some of these. Starting us off, which I believe to be is the oldest fantasy book on my shelf, that is The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender. I've heard this is a really great exploration of found family and there's magical realism, which I'm all about. But I've had this on my shelf for forever, literally since the beginning of my booktube bookstagram career, and I am not interested in this anymore. I also have Mysteries of Thorn Manor by Margaret Rogerson. I read Sorcery of Thorns so long ago that if I read this now, I would not be as excited about it because I don't remember Sorcery of Thorns. I feel like I would have to reread that one in order to read this, and I'm just not willing to do that. So if I want this, I can rebuy it. It's also just like a really tiny book that looks odd on bookshelves. We have Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson, which I do own the white collector's edition. I'm trying my hardest not to own multiple copies of books, so because of that reason I am going to get rid of this one. I love the blue. It's absolutely stunning and I cannot wait to read The Kiss of Deception as well as this series. I also have Fireborn, which I've heard great things about, but then my best friend Kendall read it and said she had a really hard time getting into it, and because I think it's part of a series, I just don't know if I want to commit the time to this one. I honestly just don't love Book of the Month copies in general. They're kind of big and bulky and I don't know, they're just not my favorite. They don't sell this cover anymore and I feel like a lot of people like it. Like I don't mind the cover, but I can also buy like the newer redone paperbacks if I really want to. I have The Demon King, a Seven Realms novel by Cinda Williams Chima, which I feel like is one of the OG book fantasy series people were reading. I'm still super intrigued by it because the ratings are crazy good, but considering this copy is just so beat up and I can buy them so cheap these days, I would rather just buy like a really good copy when I finally get into this series. Next, I have these Catherine Arden books, which kind of kills me to get rid of, but I read Bear and the Nightingale so long ago, I would have to reread it and then start on this one and then buy the third one, and I love her writing, but I remember not loving the plot. I feel like this one was super slow. Even though it's very atmospheric for winter, I might reread it at some point, but not anytime in the future. I would rather make room for new series that I'm more interested in. I also have Tempest of Tea, which is a recent fantasy read. I love the cover and I loved the sound of this book, but unfortunately it was just like a middle ground 3.5 star for me. The second half was great. I feel like so much happened, but the first half was just very lackluster. So because it was a mediocre book for me, it is not going to stay on my shelves and I probably won't continue on with the series. I also have Payback's a Witch, which I have not actually seen very good things about. I think I get so confused with all of like the witchy books out there, and I'm confused as to like which ones are the well-written ones, which one are the rom-coms. I own enough fall books already that I don't feel inclined to keep this one. We are almost there, my friends. We have just a couple books left. I have A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. I recently got the paperback version and I just don't feel like I want to keep this. I don't love this cover art as much as the beautiful floral design of the paperbacks. I have Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher, and while I feel like T. Kingfisher is easily one of my favorite authors, I haven't read enough of this author. This one was just okay. It's very small. It just doesn't stand out in my brain as like a very memorable read. I have Piranesi, which is a forever old Book of the Month book. I am tired of seeing this on my shelf. I also feel like it's just going to be way over my head. I know it's like inspired by Greek mythology. This book intrigues me, but it confuses me. And because I'm scared of it, I'm just gonna get rid of it. I also have The Death of Jane Lawrence, which I love this cover so incredibly much, but that's not a good enough reason for me to hold on to this. This book was like a 3-star. It's very slow, it's very gothic, it's very vibey and atmospheric, but other than that, not a lot happened. Romanov, which I've heard is like an Anastasia retelling, which I love Anastasia. That was like one of my favorite movies when I was a child, but I just don't know if this retelling is going to do it justice for me. I have heard great things about Nadine Brandes. I think she's actually like a Christian fantasy author. I would really love to try this book or try one of her books at some point. I've had this for way too long, y'all, and I haven't read it yet, so it's gotta go. What Became of Magic, I believe, is actually part of a series, and I was sent this finished copy without knowing. I think it's like the second or third in the series, so that was my bad. Again, it's another witchy book that sounds really fun, and it says for fans of Alice Hoffman and Deborah Harkness. Even though it says for fans of those authors, I actually don't love those authors that much, so maybe that's my sign that I can pass on this one. I also have The Loneliest Girl in the Universe, which I don't know much about. I just know it's a young adult contemporary sci-fi book, I guess. I'm interested, like I'm intrigued enough by this one, but it's so backlisted at this point, I'm sure I can easily get it somewhere else. The Queen of Nothing, which is a Book of the Month edition, which I think is so hilarious considering they never sold the other first two as part of their subscription. I think it was just really odd. I own this, and I own a paperback of The Cruel Prince that was signed. I don't even own the second book. Like, this isn't really my favorite series, even though I did enjoy this third one. It's just not a series I want to keep. Don't know if I'll ever reread it, and I don't want to own a paperback and a Book of the Month copy. I have Ray Bearer, which I've heard great and amazing things about. I bought this 2 or 3 years ago because everybody was talking about it. I feel like we're all guilty of that, but it kind of came back and bit me in the butt because have I read this? No, I have not. I feel like the hype has died down for this one. It might actually be one that my sister really enjoys, so I think I'm gonna pass it on to her. Well, friends, there is my last biggest unhaul for probably quite a while, but I feel so much better unhauling like 60 to 70 more books. I'm just so much happier with what I see on my shelves, and these are like my top priority books. None of these are top priority for me anymore, so that is the underlying reason why I decided to get rid of a lot of these. They're just not on my list for 2024, and if they're not on my list for this year, why keep them? I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed unhauling. I truly don't know if it was like the spring cleaning season getting into me or what was happening. Maybe this video will inspire you to do a purge of your own. I just want to curate and create a space that inspires creativity, makes me feel comfortable and happy, and hopefully you'll look at your bookshelves the same way I do, where life is too short to read mediocre books. Again, check out my Pango bookshelves if there's any books here that you saw and that you want to snag. I would love these books to go to a home where people will enjoy them more than I will. Thank you so much for watching this video, supporting my channel. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video.